Hello everyone, welcome to QAxon. So in this video, you will learn about energy source and muscle metabolism. Under this topic, we will first look at the different sources of energy available for skeletal muscle contraction, followed by a note on muscle fatigue. Then we will discuss rigor mortis, and finally we will examine the changes that occur in a muscle during contraction. So here we go. When a muscle starts to contract, it first relies on free ATP as a source of energy. So the muscle has small quantities of pre-synthesized ATP, and this is immediately available for contraction. But this pool is very small and can sustain only a few muscle twitches. So once the free ATP is exhausted, what is the next source of energy available to the skeletal muscle? Fortunately, the skeletal muscle has adequate stores of a molecule called creatine phosphate. This creatine phosphate quickly donates its phosphate group to ADP in order to form ATP. And this ATP can last for up to 15 seconds of muscle contraction. Now this is just a one-step reaction called Lohmann's reaction, wherein creatine phosphate reacts with ADP in the presence of the enzyme creatine kinase to generate ATP and creatine. Later, when the muscle is resting, these stores of creatine phosphate are regenerated from ATP. So once the creatine phosphate is exhausted, what is the next source of energy? Glucose is the next source of energy, and by glycolysis, two molecules of ATP are generated. Now, initially, this happens in the presence of oxygen, but very quickly it moves into anaerobic glycolysis. Now, where is this glucose coming from? What is the source of glucose? The muscle has a considerable quantity of glycogen. So this glycogen provides for the glucose. Now, the pyruvate which is generated as a result of glycolysis is processed into lactic acid, especially in the absence of oxygen. So once there is anaerobic glycolysis, this cannot go on for a long time because the tissue becomes acidic and the muscles will undergo fatigue. So this process of glycolysis can provide energy to the muscle only for about 30 seconds. As long as oxygen is available to the muscle can depend on cellular respiration for energy. So the pyruvate that is generated is taken up by the mitochondria, and via the Krebs cycle in the presence of oxygen, ATP is generated. About 30 molecules of ATP can be generated in this manner. However, once oxygen becomes limited, cellular respiration cannot go on for long. Lactic acid accumulates and the process stops. So cellular respiration helps in conserving and regenerating the stores of ATP, phosphocreatine, glycogen, etc., which can be made available for more rapid contractions. So what happens when all these sources of energy are depleted? The muscle undergoes fatigue. So fatigue is defined as a decrease in muscle tension because of repeated stimulation. Now fatigue is a reversible process, which means that if the muscle is allowed to rest, it can then recover. Now fatigue is a protective phenomenon. It is a necessary phenomenon because if fatigue were absent, then the muscle would continue to contract and this could result in structural damage to the muscle. So what are the factors which determine the onset of fatigue? The most important factor is the type of activity. The intensity and duration of contractile activity determine the onset of fatigue. So So if you're performing a high intensity short duration exercise, for example weightlifting, then you quickly undergo fatigue, but then you also recover rapidly. Only a short period of rest is sufficient for you to recover. So this type of fatigue is called high frequency fatigue because both the onset of fatigue and the recovery are quick. On the other hand, if you perform a low intensity long duration exercise, for example jogging, then fatigue takes time to occur, but then the recovery is also slow. You need a longer period of rest in order to recover. So this type of fatigue is called low frequency fatigue. Now the other important factor determining the onset of fatigue is the type of skeletal muscle fiber involved. So if it is a fast glycolytic fiber like the eye muscles, then though the contractions are rapid, the onset of fatigue is also very rapid. On the other hand, in case of the slow oxidative fibers, they can sustain an activity for a longer duration of time. Finally, the fitness of the individual also matters. For example, if you have an elderly individual or somebody with diseases or other conditions such as arthritis, heart disease, etc., then they may undergo rapid onset of fatigue.